The vast chamber of the Galactic Council glowed with an otherworldly light, emanating from crystalline structures that seemed to float in midair. 12 distinct sections housed the representatives of the founding species, their seats arranged in a perfect circle that symbolized equality and balance, values the Council had upheld for millennia across the stars. In the center of this imposing chamber stood 3 humans, dwarfed by the grand architecture and the looming presence of alien delegates. Captain Jake Morrison stood at attention, his Navy uniform immaculate, despite the strain evident in his posture. To his left, Dr. Lisa Carter nervously adjusted her glasses, her scientific mind racing to analyze their predicament. Commander Ryan Blake completed the trio, his weathered face betraying no emotion as he scanned the alien faces surrounding them. Elder Zix Thera, a being composed of shimmering light and geometric patterns, rose from the central position. When the Elder spoke, the chamber's translation systems converted the complex harmonic tones into words all could understand. The Galactic Council convenes for the 4,207th time to address matters of interstellar significance. Before us stands the delegation from Earth, representing humanity, the youngest species admitted to our cosmic fellowship. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusation. Captain Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. This was no routine diplomatic mission. Humanity, continued Elder Zix Thera. You stand accused of crimes against galactic peace. Your species' rapid expansion into 14 star systems, without proper consultation. Your militarization of disputed territories. Your refusal to adhere to resource allocation treaties. Dr. Carter stepped forward. Elder, with respect, humanity has adhered to every formal treaty we've... Silence! The harmonic voice distorted with emotion, a rarity among the Elder's species. The evidence has been presented to all Council members. Your defense has been considered and found wanting. Commander Blake leaned toward Morrison. They've already decided, he whispered. This is just theater. The Elder continued. For the preservation of galactic harmony, the Council has reached a unanimous decision. Crystalline displays materialized around the chamber, showing star charts and territorial boundaries. A region at the galaxy's outer rim glowed an ominous red. Humanity is hereby banished to the region known as the Abyss. All human settlements outside Earth's solar system must be evacuated within 30 standard days. No human vessel will be permitted to enter Council space following this period. Captain Morrison stepped forward, rage building inside him. The Abyss is uninhabitable. That region has almost no habitable planets. It's a cosmic wasteland. Then, perhaps, responded a Krell delegate, its tentacles rippling with what might have been amusement. Humanity should have considered the consequences of their actions before disturbing the harmony we have maintained for 10,000 years. This is genocide, Commander Blake stated flatly. You're condemning billions to death. You will be permitted to relocate your colonies, the Elder clarified. We are not barbarians, but the Council has spoken. This session is concluded. The crystalline gavel struck, and the sound reverberated through the chamber like the tolling of a funeral bell. As they were escorted out, Dr. Carter whispered, Jake, what are we going to do? Captain Morrison stared ahead, his jaw clenched. We're going to save our people, Lisa, whatever it takes. The evacuation began immediately. Earth's unified government declared a state of emergency, and the largest mass migration in human history commenced. 2 billion colonists across 14 star systems prepared to uproot their lives. The logistics were nightmarish: insufficient transportation, limited supplies, and the looming deadline imposed by an unsympathetic council. Admiral Kate Sullivan, commander of Earth's Defense Fleet, coordinated the evacuation from her flagship, the UNSS Horizon. Her command center was chaos, officers shouting updates, screens displaying evacuation timelines, and the constant ping of distress calls from outlying colonies. Admiral, her executive officer reported. Proxima Centauri reports 80% evacuation complete, but the situation on Epsilon Eridani is deteriorating. The colony governor is requesting additional transports. Sullivan rubbed her temples. Redirect the cargo fleet from Tau Ceti. They completed their run ahead of schedule. Yes, ma'am. And there's a message from Captain Morrison. Priority Alpha. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. Put him through. Morrison's face appeared on the central display, haggard from sleepless nights. Kate, I've just returned from New Geneva. The situation is worse than we thought. We need to accelerate the timetable. Jake, we're already pushing the evacuation to the breaking point. What happened? The Council isn't just watching. They're actively hampering our efforts. 3 of our supply convoys were inspected and delayed for 12 hours, and they've deployed observers to every major colony. Sullivan swore under her breath. They want us to fail. It gets worse. The Abyss. Kate, our preliminary probes are sending back strange readings. Radiation patterns unlike anything we've seen before. Strange energy fluctuations. It's not just uninhabitable. It's alien in ways our science doesn't fully understand. Can we petition for more time? Morrison laughed bitterly. The Krell representative suggested we should be grateful they didn't simply sterilize our colonies. Admiral Sullivan stood silent for a moment, processing this information. Then we adapt, Jake. We've always been good at that. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time humanity stopped playing by their rules. Get back to Earth. I need you for a special assignment. As the evacuation continued, Dr. Marcus Webb led a team of Marines into the newly established perimeter in the Abyss. A xenophysicist with a military background, Webb had been tasked with establishing scientific outposts to better understand their new prison. Their ship, the UNSS Pathfinder, approached an anomalous reading near the region's center. What they found defied explanation. A massive structure, clearly artificial, yet ancient beyond comprehension. It floated in the void, undamaged by time. A perfect dodecahedron with surfaces that seemed to shift between states of matter. My God, Webb whispered as they approached in environmental suits. This predates the Council races by millennia. The Marine commander, Colonel Sarah Donovan, kept her weapon ready. Are we sure it's abandoned, Doctor? Webb studied his instruments. No life signs, but there's energy flowing through it. Something still active after all this time. Their entry into the structure changed everything. Inside, they discovered a repository of knowledge left by a species that called themselves the Architects, beings that had transcended conventional space-time. The Architects had not died out. They had evolved beyond the physical realm, leaving behind tools for those who might follow. Most importantly, they discovered why the Council feared the Abyss. The region wasn't empty by chance. It had been deliberately quarantined because it contained ruptures in the fabric of reality, gateways to other dimensions where physics operated differently. Webb's hands trembled as he translated the ancient data. The Council knows about this. They've been keeping this knowledge from younger species. From us. Why? Colonel Donovan asked. Control. Webb answered simply. This technology, these dimensional breaches, they could change everything. Faster than light travel without limitations. Energy sources beyond anything we've imagined. And weapons. He paused. Weapons that could threaten even the most powerful Council races. As they explored deeper, they discovered something else. Evidence that the Architects had been battling something they called the Devourers, entities from another dimension that consumed all in their path. The Architects had sealed the breaches at great cost, and the Council had maintained the quarantine not just to hoard knowledge, but out of genuine fear. Webb sent an encrypted message directly to Admiral Sullivan. Found something that changes everything. The Abyss isn't our prison. It might be our salvation. The discovery spread quietly among human leadership. As the last colonies were evacuated, a new plan formed. Humanity, would not merely survive in the abyss, they would master it. Captain Morrison found himself reassigned to a covert operation deep within the abyss. His mission: to establish contact with species that had been marginalized by the Council, potential allies in humanity's new frontier. The first such encounter occurred 6 months after the banishment. Morrison's ship, camouflaged with technology derived from the Architect's repository, approached a hidden outpost on an asteroid at the abyss's edge. The Cathvar were not what he expected. Evolved from avian ancestors, they resembled massive ravens with iridescent feathers and 4 manipulative limbs. Once a proud spacefaring race, they had been relegated to observer status by the Council after a territorial dispute centuries ago. "You risk much by coming here, human," said Chiral, the Cathvar elder, her feathers shifting from blue to deep purple as she spoke. "The Council has eyes everywhere." "Not in the abyss," Morrison replied. "They fear it too much to monitor it closely." "With good reason," Chiral responded. "But I sense you have not come merely to exchange pleasantries." Morrison nodded. "Humanity seeks allies. The Council's banishment has shown us that their harmony is built on subjugation of younger races." "And what do you offer in this alliance?" The Cathvar's head tilted, a gesture of skepticism in their culture. "Knowledge, technology from the Architects, and a promise, when humanity rises again, we will not forget those who stood with us." The meeting lasted hours, but by its conclusion, Morrison had secured not just the Cathvar's alliance, but their expertise in dimensional mathematics, knowledge they had preserved despite the Council's restrictions. Similar diplomatic missions yielded further allies. The synthesis, a collective consciousness of machine intelligences that had escaped destruction at the Council's hands. The resonance, energy beings who had evolved in the radiation fields of the abyss and never known any other home. Each brought unique perspectives and abilities. Each had suffered under the Council's version of harmony, and each saw in humanity a catalyst for change. Meanwhile, on the hastily established colonies within the abyss, humans were adapting to their new reality. The strange radiation that permeated the region initially caused illness and mutation. But Dr. Carter led a team that developed treatments, and eventually, genetic modifications that allowed humans to thrive in the altered environment. These changes had unexpected side effects. Some humans began developing heightened intuition, bordering on precognition. Others found they could perceive energy fields invisible to unmodified humans. The military quickly established a program to harness these emerging abilities. At the same time, engineers reverse-engineered the Architect's technology, creating vessels that could navigate the dimensional breaches. These ships, faster, more maneuverable, and armed with weapons that drew power from the dimensional rifts themselves, became the core of humanity's new fleet. 2 years after the banishment, Admiral Sullivan called a summit of military and scientific leaders at the primary human settlement, New Terra. The meeting took place in a chamber constructed from materials salvaged from the Architect's repository, its walls shifting with patterns that seemed to extend into dimensions beyond normal perception. "We've done more than survive," Sullivan began, addressing the assembled leaders. "We've discovered, adapted, and grown stronger, but now we face a greater challenge." The Admiral activated a holographic display showing energy patterns across the abyss. Dr. Webb's team has detected increasing activity in the dimensional breaches. The seals created by the Architects are degrading. Dr. Webb stood, his face grave. "The data is conclusive. Within 6 months, the primary breach will collapse completely. When that happens, the Devourers will return to this dimension." The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. "Can we repair the seals?" asked a colonial governor. Webb shook his head. "The technology required is beyond our current understanding. The Architects spent centuries perfecting their methods." "Then we evacuate," suggested another leader. "Return to Council space and warn them." "And trust them to welcome us back?" Morrison interjected. They banished us here knowing this might happen. They've been using the abyss as a buffer zone, sacrificing any species they deemed unworthy to maintain their precious harmony. Admiral Sullivan raised her hand for silence. Captain Morrison is right. The Council cannot be trusted. But evacuation is not an option either. The Devourers won't stop at the abyss. According to the Architect's records, they will consume everything, Council space included. Then what do you propose, Admiral? Asked Colonel Donovan. Sullivan's eyes hardened. We fight. Not just for ourselves, but for every sentient being in this galaxy. The next 4 months saw frantic preparation. The Alliance of Outcasts pooled their knowledge and resources. The Kothvar provided insights into dimensional mathematics that accelerated weapons development. The Synthesis created predictive models of Devourer behavior based on Architect records. The Resonance taught humans to perceive and manipulate the energy fields that would herald the Devourer's arrival. Throughout human space, military training intensified. Soldiers and pilots learned to fight enemies that defied conventional physics, using simulators programmed with data from the Architect's battles. Engineers worked tirelessly, converting mining vessels and civilian transports into warships armed with dimensional weapons. Dr. Webb led the most critical project, an early warning system that would detect the first Devourers to breach the dimensional barrier. The system required sensor arrays placed near the primary breach, a mission of extreme danger. Captain Morrison volunteered to lead the deployment team. His ship, the Defiance, had been retrofitted with the best protection available, but everyone knew the risks. As they prepared for departure, Dr. Carter joined him in the launch bay. I should be going with you, she said, helping him check his equipment. The sensor calibration would be more precise with my oversight. Morrison smiled faintly. Your work on the genetic modifications is more important. Besides, someone needs to be here to analyze the data we send back. Carter hesitated, then embraced him tightly. Just come back, Jake. We need you for what's coming. I always do, he replied, his confidence belying the uncertainty he felt. The Defiance's mission was nearly catastrophic. As they deployed the final sensor array, the breach pulsed with energy, and for a brief moment, it widened. The ship's sensors recorded glimpses of what lay beyond, a realm of chaotic energy where monstrous forms moved with predatory purpose. The pulse created a shockwave that damaged the Defiance's propulsion system. As emergency repairs were underway, the sensor array captured the first clear images of a Devourer as it partially phased into their dimension, a massive entity that seemed to shift between states, with appendages that bent in impossible angles and a maw that distorted space itself. The creature sensed the human vessel and moved toward it with terrifying speed. Only the quick thinking of the navigator, who initiated an emergency dimensional jump using technology still in the experimental phase, saved the ship and its crew. When the Defiance returned to New Terra, its recording sent ripples of fear through the Alliance. The Devourers were more terrible than even the Architect's records had suggested, and they were coming sooner than anticipated. Admiral Sullivan convened an emergency war council. The breach will fully collapse in approximately 2 weeks, she announced. Dr. Webb's analysis suggests we'll face not a single Devourer, but thousands. Our fleet isn't ready, Morrison reported grimly. We have 70 vessels equipped with dimensional weapons, but half of those are converted civilian ships with minimal armor. The Kothvar can provide another 30 ships, offered Chiral. Small, but fast and already adapted to the abyss's radiation. The Synthesis have completed 2 dreadnoughts, added the Machine Collective's representative, a humanoid form composed of shifting nanites. They are untested in combat, but theoretically capable of sustaining significant damage. Sullivan nodded. It will have to be enough. She turned to Dr. Webb. What about the Morrison Protocol? The chamber fell silent. The protocol, named after Captain Morrison, who had first proposed the concept, was their last resort, a desperate measure that might turn the tide if conventional warfare failed. Webb looked uncomfortable. The theory is sound, but the risks are substantial. We've had no opportunity to test it under controlled conditions. Explain it to our allies, Sullivan directed. Webb stood, activating a display that showed complex equations and energy patterns. The Devourers exist partially in our dimension and partially in their own. This makes them difficult to destroy with conventional weapons. However, it also creates a vulnerability. He highlighted a section of the display. If we could create a sufficient chaotic energy discharge, precisely calibrated to the Devourer's dimensional frequency, it would disrupt their ability to maintain cohesion between dimensions. In simpler terms, asked the Resonance representative, a shimmering field of light. We create a bomb, Morrison interjected. But not a physical one. An energy weapon that generates dimensional chaos, like setting off a fire in the fabric of space-time itself. The problem, Webb continued, is delivery and control. The discharge must occur in proximity to the primary breach, and once initiated, it will grow exponentially. The ship carrying the device would almost certainly be destroyed, along with anything nearby. And the effects on our dimension, Chiral asked. Localized reality distortions, possible creation of new, smaller breaches. We can't be certain. This goes beyond theoretical physics into the realm of the unknown. Admiral Sullivan's expression was grim. The protocol remains our contingency plan. We deploy it only if conventional warfare fails. She surveyed the assembled leaders. Are we in agreement? One by one, they nodded. The decision was made. The Allied fleet took position near the primary breach 5 days before its projected collapse. Every ship was equipped with the best weapons and defenses the Alliance could produce. Every crew was prepared for what might be their final mission. On the horizon, Admiral Sullivan addressed the fleet. We stand at the edge of darkness, facing an enemy that would consume all life, all civilization. We fight not just for ourselves, but for every sentient being in this galaxy, including those who cast us out. In the Defiance, positioned at the forward edge of the fleet, Captain Morrison listened to the Admiral's words. His ship had been selected to carry the dimensional charge for the Morrison Protocol, a responsibility that weighed heavily on him. Dr. Carter had joined his crew at the last minute, insisting that her expertise would be needed to calibrate the device if deployment became necessary. Morrison had not argued. Somehow, it felt right that they would face this together. The waiting was the hardest part. Ships maintained position, sensors constantly scanning for the slightest change in the breach. Officers spoke in hushed tones. Some prayed to gods from a dozen worlds. When it came, it was more terrible than any simulation had predicted. The breach didn't simply collapse. It exploded outward. A tsunami of dimensional energy that washed over the forward ships, temporarily disabling systems and disorienting crews. And then the Devourers came. They poured through the breach like a nightmare tide, entities of impossible geometry, some massive as capital ships, others small but countless in number. Their forms defied comprehension, shifting and changing as they moved, leaving trails of distorted reality in their wake. All ships, engage! Admiral Sullivan's command cut through the chaos. Maintain formation and focus fire on the largest entities. The battle erupted in spectacular fashion. Dimensional weapons fired streams of chaotic energy that tore through the Devourers, causing parts of their forms to dissolve or be forced back into their native dimension. But for every one that fell, 3 more emerged from the breach. The Caithvar ships darted between the massive entities, their precision strikes targeting what appeared to be sensory organs. The synthesis dreadnoughts absorbed incredible punishment, their self-repairing hulls constantly adapting to the Devourers' attacks. But it wasn't enough. 3 hours into the battle, a third of the fleet had been destroyed or disabled. The Devourers were adapting, becoming more resistant to the dimensional weapons with each encounter. On the horizon, Admiral Sullivan received the casualty reports with a heavy heart. They're learning, she told her officers. adjusting their dimensional frequency to minimize the weapon's effects. "The breach continues to widen," reported her science officer. "At current rates, it will be large enough for the Devourers to pass through to Council space within hours." Sullivan closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her decision was made. Signal the Defiance. Initiate the Morrison Protocol. Captain Morrison received the order with a strange sense of calm. "Acknowledged. Admiral, moving into position." "Jake," Carter said quietly beside him. "The calculations indicate the dimensional charge needs to be detonated from inside the breach itself to have maximum effect." "Then that's where we'll take it," he replied. "The ship won't survive the transition." Morrison turned to his crew. "I'll take a shuttle. The rest of you will withdraw to minimum safe distance." His executive officer stood. "With respect, Captain, that's not acceptable. The shuttle won't have the necessary shielding to get close enough." "I'm not asking for volunteers." "You don't have to," Carter said, taking his hand. "We've already decided." Morrison looked around the bridge, seeing determination in every face. After a moment, he nodded. "Set course for the breach. All power to forward shields." The Defiance broke formation, accelerating toward the chaotic maw where dimensions collided. Devourers sensed their approach and moved to intercept. But the rest of the fleet provided covering fire, carving a path through the hostile swarm. As they neared the breach, reality itself seemed to bend and distort around them. Ship systems fluctuated wildly. Crew members reported seeing impossible things, glimpses of other timelines, other possibilities. In the engine room, engineers made final adjustments to the dimensional charge. The device was deceptively small, a crystalline sphere housing technology derived from the architect's repositories, infused with energy from the abyss itself. 2 minutes to breach perimeter," announced the navigator, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Morrison turned to Carter. "Final status on the charge?" "Ready for activation," she replied. "But Jake, there's something I didn't tell the others. The calculations suggest that a biological component, a living mind, would stabilize the reaction, making it far more effective." "What are you saying?" "The charge needs to be mentally activated from within the containment field. Someone needs to become part of it." Morrison absorbed this information silently. Then, with quiet resolve, "Show me how." Carter's eyes widened. "Jake, no. I came to do it myself." "That's not happening. Lisa." His voice was gentle but firm. "The fleet needs your knowledge if this works. They need you to understand what happened here." Before she could argue further, a massive impact rocked the ship. A devourer, larger than any they'd encountered, had latched onto the hull, its impossible appendages beginning to phase through the armor plating. "Breach imminent!" shouted the tactical officer. 30 seconds! Morrison moved swiftly to the engine room, Carter following close behind. The dimensional charge sat in its containment field, pulsing with potential energy. "How do I do this?" he asked. With tears in her eyes, Carter made the final adjustments to the field. "Step inside. Place your hands on the sphere. Your consciousness will form a bridge between dimensions, guiding the energy where it needs to go." Morrison nodded. He turned to his executive officer, who had followed them. "Get everyone to the escape pods. That's an order."
"Captain."
"That's an order. Commander, make sure Dr. Carter goes with you." As the crew reluctantly prepared to abandon ship, Morrison stepped into the containment field. The moment his hands touched the crystalline sphere, he felt his consciousness expand. Suddenly, he could perceive the dimensional breach not as a physical phenomenon, but as a wound in reality itself, a place where the natural order had been violently torn apart. And he could sense the devourers, not as physical entities but as patterns of consumption, voids that sought to draw all energy, all matter, all existence into themselves. His last physical sensation was Carter's hand on the field barrier, her lips forming words he couldn't hear, but somehow understood. "Find your way back," Then his consciousness merged with the dimensional charge, becoming a catalyst for chaos. The Defiance exploded in a burst of dimensional energy, unlike anything the Alliance had ever witnessed. But rather than dissipating, the energy coalesced into a swirling vortex centered on the breach. At its heart, observers briefly glimpsed a human form composed entirely of chaotic energy. Morrison, transformed. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and devastating. The dimensional frequency of the chaotic energy matched their own, but inverted, creating a cascade of destructive interference. The entities began to destabilize, unable to maintain cohesion between dimensions. Some were forced back through the breach. Others dissolved into formless energy. The largest fought against the effect, but even they could not withstand the growing chaos. Most remarkably, the breach itself began to seal. The chaotic energy Morrison had become was knitting reality back together, closing the wound between dimensions. From the horizon, Admiral Sullivan watched in awe. "What's happening?" she asked the science officer. "The protocol is working, but not as we predicted. Captain Morrison hasn't just created chaos. He's controlling it somehow, directing it." The battle turned decisively. With the Devourers in disarray and their reinforcements cut off, the Allied fleet pressed their advantage. Ship after ship reported successful engagements. The tide was turning. 3 hours later, it was over. The breach had sealed completely. The remaining Devourers had been destroyed or forced back to their dimension. But of the Defiance and Captain Morrison, nothing remained except a faint energy signature that defied analysis. In the aftermath, as ships limped back to New Terra for repairs, Admiral Sullivan faced a new development. A council vessel appeared at the edge of the abyss, requesting communication. The message was brief. The council had detected the dimensional disturbance and witnessed the battle from afar. They recognized the threat humanity had confronted and eliminated. In light of this service to galactic security, the banishment would be lifted. Humanity could return to council space. Admiral Sullivan's response was equally brief. "We decline." The council representative, a Krell, seemed confused. "You prefer exile in this dangerous region to the civilization and safety of council space." Sullivan smiled. "We prefer freedom to subjugation. We prefer growth to stagnation. And we've found something here the council never understood. True allies who value cooperation over control. The abyss is unstable. There will be other breaches, other threats. Then we will face them," Sullivan replied. "As guardians of chaos, standing watch at the edge of reality, not because your council commands it, but because it's the right thing to do." As the council vessel departed, Admiral Sullivan stood on the observation deck of the horizon, gazing out at the stars of the abyss, stars that now represented not punishment, but possibility. Beside her stood Dr. Carter, who had been recovered from one of the Defiance's escape pods. "Do you think he's really gone?" Carter asked quietly. Sullivan followed her gaze to a particular point in space, where instruments occasionally detected unusual energy patterns. "I think Jake Morrison became something we don't yet understand. But no, I don't think he's gone." In the void where the breach had been, a pattern of energy briefly coalesced into a recognizable form before dispersing again. A human figure composed of chaotic light, standing guard at the boundary between dimensions. Humanity had been banished to the abyss, but they had conquered it instead. And in doing so, they had discovered a greater purpose, protectors, not just of their own species, but of all life in the galaxy, whether that life acknowledged them or not. In the years that followed, the Alliance grew stronger. The human settlements in the abyss flourished, developing technologies and societies unlike anything in council space. Other marginalized species sought refuge there, contributing their unique perspectives and abilities. And occasionally, on the fringes of settled space, explorers would report strange phenomena, reality shifting briefly, and in that moment, a figure of chaotic energy, appearing to guide them safely through dangerous regions. The Resonance named these manifestations Morrison's Echo, but humans simply called them Jake, the first guardian of chaos, forever watching over the dimension he had sacrificed himself to protect. The Council never fully understood what they had created when they banished humanity. They had intended to remove a disruptive influence from their carefully ordered society. Instead, they had catalyzed the formation of a new power, one that embraced chaos not as a force of destruction, but as the ultimate expression of freedom, adaptation, and growth. And when new threats emerged from beyond the dimensional barriers, as they inevitably would, it would not be the ordered might of the Council that stood against them, but the chaotic brilliance of humanity and their allies, guardians of a universe far more complex and wonderful than the Council had ever dared to imagine.